Welcome to Expedition Networking, a special segment of the Networking RX podcast. I'm Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections, and your host for this program. For those of you who are familiar, on the Networking RX podcast, we share information and have conversations with experts, such as authors, researchers, and social scientists. And all of these programs are aimed at helping you learn how to become better at building professional relationships and understanding why they work. In this Expedition Networking segment, however, we're going to bring on successful entrepreneurs and unique professionals and explore their networking adventure and learn how they used relationships to create lasting success. Today on Expedition Networking, we have Brian Bachand. Brian is the founder of Evolution, and this is going to be a very interesting story. Bear with me. Stick with this. But he spent over a decade focused on not-for-profits, helping them in development. He was an instrumental part of a $2 million campaign for the largest medical school in Canada, and he led a yearly multi-million-dollar campaign in New York City. And manage relationships with Fortune 500 companies for the American Cancer Society, in New York City. So, but leading up to that, it's an incredible story, and it's all about relationships. Brian, welcome to the program.
Frank, what a pleasure. Thanks so much for the invitation to be here today.
All right, take us through it. I've heard the story. They always say, a good attorney doesn't ask questions unless he knows the answer. And I know the answer, and not that I'm a good attorney or I'm not even practicing. But that's part of the reason I wanted to have you on here, because it's a fascinating story. So I'll leave it to you at this point.
Well, that's an open-ended canvas, yeah. But I'll jump in just starting about who is this Brian Bachand that you're listening to today. So I'm coming to you from Toronto, but I'm an American living in Canada. Not as glamorous as an American living in Paris, but it works. And so I was born and raised in Boston. So yes, I was a Red Sox fan. And after university, went back to Boston, and I was 21, and I entered the seminary to study to become a Catholic priest. And I went through the seminary. It was a 6-year program. I was able to do it in 5 years, not because I was some super gifted student. It's simply because I had a second language at the time, and I had some philosophy credits, so they let me skip one of the years. And it was an amazing experience. The formation, every year you had a pastoral assignment as well as academic formation. My first year, I was sent to the Women's State Prison to teach, which was incredible. I did hospice work. They sent me to Ecuador one summer to learn Spanish, but also work in a very, very poor area. And it was incredible. So when I was ordained in 1999, you had an excellent formation, well-rounded. And I was ordained as a priest for the Archdiocese of Boston. And the day of the ordination, it's like a 3.5 hour ceremony. And when I was ordained, the cardinal at that time used to say the very end of the ceremony is when you would find out your assignment. So it was kind of like the Academy Award. You have to go through 3 hours to find out, what's the best picture. You go through everything. And at the end of that is when it was announced that I was going to St. Mary's in Holliston. And I was thrilled, because St. Mary's in Holliston was west of the city in this beautiful New England town with the stone walls and rolling hills. It was just beautiful. 2,800 families. And it was a great first assignment for Brian, who was, I think, just turned 27 at the time. And I did weddings like there was no tomorrow, baptisms, went to the hospital, was involved with education, all aspects. And it was amazing. And then at the end of 4 years, on a Thursday night, I received a phone call from, there was a new cardinal that came to town. There had been a huge moment in the Archdiocese and in the whole church of the sexual abuse scandal. And so there was restitution to be made. And the cardinal that came to town was really there to bring healing and to help move that process forward. So he was also picking his new staff. And I was selected to be his new private secretary. That would translate, Frank, into being like chief of staff.
Right.
So literally overnight, my life changed. I went from, being Father Brian in the parish, doing day-to-day things, to all of a sudden being on a plane with him, going to the Vatican, meeting with the Pope, to, being his master of ceremonies, being a ghostwriter, being the bridge for all of his events. And it was a very intimate relationship because I lived with him, I worked with him, I had every meal he had, I had with him. And it was a real privilege because he was a very authentic human being that was really trying to bring healing, to bring hope, and had to make some very difficult decisions. And I was there to help support him. And it was an amazing time, absolutely amazing time. But then I asked myself an important question, and I'll pause there. What do I desire? And I was in a moment in my life when that question really became front and center. And that's when I began to make some new decisions.
And what's the new decision? That's when you left, right?
I did. So at that moment, I was at a moment that I was obviously being groomed for more leadership in the church. And I have to say, I was a very happy priest. I was, I know I was deeply loved. I know I made impact on people's lives and brought value. And it was a real privilege. At the same time, there were two things that happened. I really came to know that I wanted to be able to be free to love another person authentically as Brian from my heart, and was not going to be able to do that freely in the church. And I also knew that I wanted to bring my gifts into the world in a different way outside of an institution. And so I freely made the decision. I took about a year, still working full-time for the Cardinal, working with someone professionally. And I told a couple friends who I could really trust that I was really contemplating about really stepping away from ministry, and made that decision, courageously in many ways, because there had been a number of years invested. There were lots of feelings I had about expectations, family expectations on me, friends' expectations. What would people think? What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? But that all brought, in time, I had the clarity, and I made the decision, and I left, and I moved to New York City. I knew that's where I wanted to be. And I moved there and began an entirely new life as an executive in the world of philanthropy. And I loved it.
Well, I guess two thoughts. When you were confiding in people, were any of them, I don't want to say trying to talk you out of it, but you're saying, hey, wait a minute, you need to think twice about this? I used to practice law. And I remember going to people saying, you know what, I'm going to stop the practice of law. Like, you're what? You spent all that time? You spent 5 years preparing for this career. It's not a career, it's a life. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to walk away from it. There had to be somebody saying, well, what are you thinking? Are you okay?
Yeah, exactly. Well, first of all, I have to say, I'm the first one that raised my hand to ask that question. And so one of the things that you do when you're a priest that, and I think in every diocese in the country or religious order, if you're a priest and let's say you're having some challenges, maybe you're struggling with that question, should I stay, should I go? Or maybe you're struggling with an alcohol addiction, or maybe there's, a gambling addiction, whatever it may be. There's always a priest you can go to in the diocese that represents it. You can go to him and say, this is where I'm at. I need some help. This is what I'm wanting to do. So I went to that priest. I knew him, and I simply said to him, I said, listen, I'm actually really thinking of, stepping away, but I want to test this. I want to make sure that I'm looking at this the right way and do things the right way. And I said, I would like to work with someone professionally, that could be objective. There's one thing about friends, right? Friends are great, but they also can be a little biased. Mm-hmm. So I wanted someone, as you're a lawyer, so you can understand, I wanted a jury that had not seen any news media. So I said, I want someone that's neutral. And I made it very clear. I said, I want no one affiliated with the church. And I ended up, I worked with this wonderful Jewish psychologist in Boston. And I wanted that on purpose, someone who just could be very neutral. And he was one of the greatest blessings in my life at that time. And all he knew is that I was a priest, and I arrived in his office, and he thought I might be dealing with stress just because of the job. He knew the job I had. And I said, oh, no. I said, the reason I'm here is because I'm thinking of leaving. I've come to terms that I want to love another person. I'm truly authentic to who I am. I want to live that out as an openly gay man. I'm not going to hide between shadows, and I want to move forward. But I want to do this in the right way. And I want to make sure that I'm looking at all the things I need to. That relationship is what tested that. And that was a gift. And so when it came time to speak to the cardinal and to friends and family, I had done the deep inner work. So whenever people could ask those questions, wow, are you really thinking about this? I had such clarity with my answer to give to them. Their questions didn't create doubt. When we don't have the clarity, we can we can start running in circles. I was crystal clear because of the inner work that I did. And I really respected when people ask questions. Most people were extremely supportive. However, I did have some great challenges as well.
I'm sure, yeah.
From family and some friends.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. I have shared your story with. I'm Catholic. I've shared your story with people, and nobody says anything, but you can kind of gauge the reaction, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not all negative. Don't take it that way. But there are some where you kind of really priests don't do this forever kind of reactions. Some are intrigued by it. But I guess getting back to where you got into development work, not-for-profit work in New York City. What I find fascinating about this, and I'll let you elaborate on it, is you just don't go from the church and jump into this. You built a network, you built a foundation through your work. I guess talk to the whole notion of recycling these contacts. You knew me as this, now I'm this. I don't know if thoughts on that as far as how that went. And
absolutely. And that's why I love the title of your podcast and networking. I think that's one of the reasons we get along, because it's in like my DNA. So when I made the decision, that I was going to move forward, to leave, I just intuitively knew that I needed to connect with people that I could trust and speak about. It's a career change. It's a lifestyle change. And for those individuals who are listening that are kind of maybe in that moment, or they've done that, you want to connect with people that you can trust, but also guide you in the right way. So it has always been very natural for me. Obviously, you can tell I'm an extrovert. I love connecting with people. I love building relationships. But what I did is, when I decided to then take the step to really start looking at jobs, and I wasn't sure what area, I looked at my network. Obviously, working with the Cardinal, there were a few very influential people that I had come to know, and actually some former parishioners and in my own network. And I selected about 10 of them. I reached out to them confidentially. And I simply just said to them, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm thinking. I would welcome any guidance you may have, or anyone you suggest for me to connect with. There was one gentleman I met. I met him because of our interactions, obviously, with the White House. And he worked at the White House, and he was a lovely man. And I remember he was really, really nice. I reached out to him, and he said, I want to connect you with someone in New York City. And he did. And that gentleman in New York City really became kind of like, to use a term that I can say this, like a guardian angel. As I developed my resume, as I developed opportunities, he would kind of look at it. Oh, this is really good. And this is on point. He'd been on Wall Street, and, he was just a good human being. And, I just kept following the leads. And I knew in my heart I was going to land. I knew it was New York City, and I narrowed it down to a couple areas that would be fairly easy for me to transfer my skill set into. HR was one area. There was talk about university work. Fundraising had been mentioned, but never really at a high level. And basically what happened was, it was a great story. I was in my room at the cathedral and I had like an hour free, and I went on my computer and I'm like on Indeed or something in New York City, jobs. And all of a sudden this job came up that simply said American Cancer Society, director's level, and they needed someone that could build high level relationships to bring in revenue for their events. And I knew as soon as I saw that, I said, that's my job. That is my job. And I applied online, but then this goes into the networking aspect. I said, I really need to take this a step further. So I researched who I thought might be the hiring manager and reached out to them. And they followed up and they simply said, I never got your resume, but I'm happy to connect. And that led to a phone interview, that led to an in-person interview, that led to me getting hired.
I mean, that is a great lesson for everybody out there who's in transition doing stuff online. And my daughter was in a job search last year, and I told her, I said, you just can't throw things out there and expect anything of them.
And it's funny you say, and I tell people that as well. I use that story to really show people, first of all, don't waste your time just applying online to things. However, that's the nature of the beast, right? Sometimes you have to. However, when there's something that just ignites a joy, a spark within you, you're like, wow, I really want this. Take it up a notch. Take it up a notch and start reaching out, because that's how I got my job. And that's how I did it. And the other thing I did is I used to, on my days off, when I really knew New York was where I wanted to go, I just started Googling recruitment companies. And I would reach out to recruiters in New York that would take my call, share who I was at, send them my resume. And anyone that would meet with me, I would go meet with them in person.
Interesting.
And that really helps build some of those connections.
I would imagine the skill set you had as a priest, and I'm not preaching, but listening. I mean, because I think that's not 90%. That's a large portion of being a priest, listening to people's problems. If you go to church on Sunday and that's all you do, then it's all preaching. That's all you get. But I think the rest of the week is a lot of listening and just interacting with people in relationships that carried over for you in this American Cancer Society position then.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. One of the number one feedback I get now, years later, is about my listening. When I work with clients, when I work with organizations, although I do a lot of public speaking and I love that, there is a sense, I know from being a priest in the training, my ability to listen, and not listen just to respond, but also listen to what is not being spoken, and listening to the other agendas that might be taking place are really heightened. I have to say, being a priest, we were trained in counseling, we were trained in dealing with people, but really working with the cardinal is where that sense of listening to the external environment of what's going on, even though it's a very faith-focused role, it's also very politicized as well. There's a lot of people that come to see the cardinal because they all want something, or there's an issue, or there's a sense of power, and you see that, and you see how people can play. They used to play me to be able to get to him, to get to different things. And I understood that. I always kept it in the right place, but that prepared me for New York City and going into business, because I'd be at a meeting in New York City and right away would go into that mindset of, what is the real agenda here? Why is this person dominating the conversation so much? Or why is this person trying to really cut down someone else because they're trying to make their point so they look higher in authority? That training was incredible. And it helped me navigate and also not get pulled into things that were just a bunch of wasted drama that I'm sure people who are listening who are in the workplace, it's easy to get sucked into things that take away. And I'm not saying that every single time, I didn't get pulled in sometimes, but it really helped navigate that. And I found even in the business world, I was always kind of that person that people came to, even if they didn't know I was a priest. I think it was always interesting that I was always the one that got the knock at the door, like, hey, do you have a minute? I just want to run something by you. This happened earlier today and I'm feeling this way. And people that I weren't even like close to, it was always interesting to observe that.
Interesting. I guess let's fast forward. Where are we headed? I know you got several companies. I think 3 I counted. Talk about those.
Yeah, sure. So, New York was amazing. American Cancer got promoted. Then I went on to become executive director at NYU Medical. That was incredible. Built a huge network in New York City. And that networking is what allowed me to raise money, especially in 2008, 2009, when everything else got dried up. Because I really am an advocate, a huge advocate. You need to diversify your networking. It's like a financial portfolio. You need to diversify. If you just network, if you're an engineer and you just work with engineers, not good. So I networked with people in the financial sector, the entertainment sector, from interior design to own companies. And that just generated more money and more opportunities. And that was amazing. That's one of the reasons that New York was successful, because I diversified. And then I met a Canadian. That was the whole reason for the move to Toronto. And that was the reason for the move to Toronto at that time. Came here, continued in philanthropy, became a partner in executive search. But then I decided a year and a half ago to go out on my own and start my own company to bring it all together. And that's called Evolution.
And that's your first company. That's your global consult or coaching.
That's exactly.
Consultant.
That's
right.
it. Exactly. So that company is really founded. It's named twice. Someone recently asked me, I thought this was the funniest thing. Is it named twice on purpose? I'm like, well, what do you think? I'm like, it's my logo. I couldn't believe someone, did you name it twice on purpose? I'm like, oh, no, it's just a typo, So it was just one of the funniest questions. So it's named Evolution for a reason. The first evolution represents our natural evolution as humans, the DNA we have, how a pandemic affects every human being. But the second evolution is the one about the evolution we want to own personally and professionally, to be aligned with our greatest strengths, to make the greatest impact in business and our companies and those around us. So I do a lot of one-on-one coaching and deep mentoring with executive leaders. New CEOs, one particular area I spend a lot of time with are people in career transition, because I kind of walk that talk. Second area is with organizations. And the third area is a lot of public speaking and workshops and things of that nature, which I really love doing. A very new mindset of what it means to be an evolved leader. But one of the things that's pretty amazing that happened, this leads to the newest venture that's also launched, is when I was about to launch Evolution, I knew I needed to own my story. I never hid that I had been a priest, but I never led with it when I went to New York. I really wanted to prove that I could be an executive, that I could make the impact. And I knew by starting my own company, I needed to own that more, because talk about evolution, that is evolution. And so I really kind of shared about my story, having been a priest and executive and now my own. And I started doing a lot of interviews and speaking about that. And one of them went across Canada, one on Sirius Radio and some other podcasts. And all of a sudden, all these former priests started connecting with me. Some of them, it was just very serendipitous how things happened. Some of it they were intentionally reached out. And I started having all these Zooms with priests all over the place. That, wow, I was a priest for so many years. I left. This is what my transition was like. Now I'm doing this, or this happened to me, that the church, they were not very supportive. when I was in a moment of transition, and they, everyone had different stories. So I listened, and I knew something was happening. I was like, in my own meditation, I was like, what am I supposed to do with all these random former priests, in my life? And Frank, one morning, it was very simple. I was making my bed, just making my bed, when this thought came to my mind. It said, bring them together.
Yeah.
And it was so clear. And it was also just such a sense of, don't come up with an agenda, just bring them together to share their stories. So I did. On the 1-year anniversary of my company, which is November 11th, 11/11, I did that night. And priests from Europe, across Canada, the United States, got on a Zoom and simply shared their stories about why they left, where they are now. Maybe some are married, some are in new transitions of career, some have done extremely well, some are still kind of finding their way. And what came out of that was the most beautiful, positive, uplifting experience that led to a monthly event. Every single month, we've continued to meet, and it continues to grow and grow. And we have a topic every month. From, one topic was about spirituality. How is that now in your life? About love, about relationships, about work, whatever it may be. But out of that, there were a couple of us that got together that we've launched another company called Avanti, which is Italian for the word forward. That is a company now founded for men who have been priests or religious that are either in the process of thinking to leave or have left. And it's a 4 or 6 month holistic approach to help them with the transition. So we have, professional coaching. It helps them with their resume, helps them look at interviewing skills. There are webinars. There are ways to look at finances, etc. Nothing like it exists in the world. And nothing exists in the church to support anyone that wants to leave. And I think that's the greatest gift. This is all about continuing to help individuals with joy continue to serve in the world. And that's what it's all about. And it's really, really exciting. And it's just really beautiful, that this is what's coming forward.
It's an amazing story. I knew it was coming, so I think it's great. Really appreciated having you on today. To get a hold of you, I was going to put your web address in the show notes, and they can connect to you there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my website's going through an evolution. It's all being updated and changed, but you can reach out through there, send me a message through there. It's, evolution.com, or you can email at brianevolution.com. Also LinkedIn. I'm heavily active on LinkedIn. Send me a message, say that you heard me here on the amazing podcast hosted by Frank, and I will make sure to connect with you.
All right. Well, thank you for your time today.
What a pleasure. Thanks so much.
To wrap things up, remember, we're looking for some enterprising business types to join our team as franchisees of AmSpirit Business Connections. Our franchisees work with entrepreneurs, sales representatives, and professionals in their area to help them become more successful through networking and the exchange of quality business referrals in a structured weekly morning meeting. This is a unique franchise opportunity, you see, because these meetings are in the morning. A successful business type or professional can add this franchise opportunity onto what they're already doing. Again, all of our franchisees do something else. For a couple hours in the morning, a few mornings a week, these franchisees work the AmSpirit Business Connections model. The rest of the time, they're attorneys, accountants, realtors, coaches, and consultants of various kinds. The wonderful thing is that not only do our franchisees realize a financial gain from operating the AmSpirit Business Connections model, but the business networks that they build and develop become a great source of referrals for their primary business as well. Perhaps you know someone, perhaps you are that someone. Whatever the case, to learn more about the AmSpirit Business Connections franchise opportunity, please contact me using the email in the show notes or the one we provide at the end of this program.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.